Welcome to The Savvy Sauce, where we have practical chats for intentional living. I'm your host, Laura Duggar, and I'm so glad you're here. Today's message is not intended for little ears. We'll be discussing some adult themes, and I want you to be aware before you listen to this message. I can't wait to tell you about my fantastic experience with the Homeschool Printing Company. Visit thehomeschoolprintingcompany.com today and enjoy 10% off your first order. Thank you for tuning in to the conclusion of our Top 10 series. Next week, we're going to have a guest that you won't want to miss. But first, we get to hear from our number one most downloaded episode of 2025 with my incredible returning guests, Dr. Clifford and Joyce Penner. The Penners are best known for their pioneer work in encouraging people of all faiths to connect their sexuality with their belief system, helping them embrace sex as good and of God. Dr. Clifford is a licensed clinical psychologist, and Joyce is a registered nurse and clinical nurse specialist. They are highly respected authors and speakers, in addition to being parents and grandparents. You are in for a treat today. Here's our chat. Welcome back to The Savvy Sauce, Cliff and Joyce.
We're glad to be back and nice to be seeing each other on this. It's great.
Absolutely. It adds a bonus, wonderful extra layer. And the two of you have been on previously. We're familiar that you have a unique line of work, and it's amazing that you get to do it together. But I'd love to know, what is your favorite part of the work that you get to do?
It is so rewarding to experience the change that can happen in people's lives.
We were just this last weekend, we were up in Three Hills, Alberta, Canada, speaking to a college group, and we got a response there that kind of answers your question.
Yes, one of the faculty people said that 25 years ago, they had gotten married and gone on our website, passionatecommitment.com, and it read one of the answers to our question about how past childhood sexual abuse can affect your marriage. And it just fit them perfectly, and they did everything we recommended, and it has made a major difference in their lives and was such a healing work. And that's 25 years ago from something on our website.
We never even talked to them.
Not even therapy. And it's that kind of a thing that just warms us. And particularly, I think, when we can even prevent, like when premarital couples, people who are anticipating marriage, come to us and ask for help or call. We accept calls, and I do about 10, 15 minutes kind of triage free for anybody who calls. We're not practicing much anymore because we're now in our 80s, but we still can make a difference because in a few minutes I can give them some direction.
Well, let's give an example. Yeah. In our book, Getting Your Sex Life Off to a Great Start, in the chapter on the honeymoon, right in the middle of it, we say, and if you guys run into trouble on your honeymoon, call us. So we get calls from all over the world while people are on their honeymoon. And
it's so great because that honeymoon is what we think back to every anniversary. And if it was painful and didn't work and was disappointing
and emotionally stressful,
so I can just give them some little help and then say, and do this and just really get to know yourselves and enjoy it, and we'll fix the problem when you get back. But make it a special time. And that kind of thing, it just warms us. I mean, it just blesses us so much to know that God is using us in that way.
And you really model. It truly is better to give than to receive. I'm sure you receive so much encouragement through their words.
Yes.
And would you mind even sharing that phone number if somebody's listening and they want to reach out? What is that number?
No, I think you should give the office number, 626
Okay.
449-2525. 626-449-2525.
And we also have on our website our home office number. We'll let that, you can go to our website to get that, because then it goes directly into our home and I can answer it from here.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important. We'll kind of talk about 3 different phases. You brought up newlyweds, and I'd love to hear more about that stage of life. But then also couples who want to be intentional with their sex lives, even if they're currently content.
Mm-hmm.
And then also addressing the married couples who are facing some challenges currently. And also couples who are in a sexless marriage. And so, first of all, let's just go back. Let's elaborate on what you're saying about newlyweds. What are a couple of your most important tips that you want newlyweds to know?
First of all, to talk about it and to plan and prepare, so that so many times, even well-educated, highly educated couples, brilliant, bright, will say, oh, but we don't want to spoil it by talking about it ahead of time.
And that's such a bad way of thinking. Such a destructive way
it may
of thinking.
work for a few couples, but the majority,
What they'll often say is, let's just do what comes naturally. And what comes naturally most of the time doesn't work if they haven't prepared for it.
And talked about it and made sure there are no barriers, and particularly for premarital couples, if one question we ask is, for the woman, have you ever been able to use a tampon? And if she says, no, I tried and it didn't work, or whatever, or have you been able to go to the doctor and have a gynecological examination? No, I didn't do that. Well, to never have been able to use a tampon and expect to be able to consummate your marriage, it just will not work. And so then that's just the tampon thing. It isn't that you have to use tampons. It's just a way of assessing quickly whether there could be an issue with difficulty consummating.
So what we recommend is the couple, if they need a guide for talking about it, use a book like our book, Getting Your Sex Life Off to a Great Start. Walks them through every aspect of preparing to be together sexually. And even if couples have had sex prior to getting married, it still is something we would recommend for couples getting married, because we find that premarital sex and married sex has a different feeling to it.
Once you're committed, things that happen in our background can trigger a negative reaction. And you could have been highly, intensely passionate before marriage and so eager to consummate or have had great sex. And then you get married and all of a sudden something shuts down. And we can anticipate that and prevent it and give some tools ahead of time if people are willing to engage in the process.
The other thing we talk about is clarifying our expectations, so that if the guy thinks we're going to have sex 3 times a day,
Or the gal,
and the other one thinks, well, maybe we'll have sex once on our honeymoon. Those are, or maybe even beyond the honeymoon, what the expectations are in terms of life.
Well, and so many times the couple thinks the guy should plan a surprise honeymoon. We do not recommend surprise honeymoon.
There's too many disastrous surprise honeymoons.
And a man with lots of wealth to do a great honeymoon, and the gal just hates the environment which he chose.
And here he spent zillions of dollars on it, and she's trying to be a good sport, but is not having a good time. So always plan it together, from our perspective.
That is so wise because that spills into so many other future areas. I'm thinking when that couple transitions then to having children, going back to what you said, if she's choosing to nurse and she thinks, well, I'll just do whatever comes naturally, there can still be a lot to learn. And so it's always wise to plan and prepare. And I love that you brought up one of your books. That's a great one. I wonder if people could even take that on the honeymoon with them.
Oh, yeah, but we would recommend that they prep for the 6 months before the wedding, reading through it step by step, and then take it with them on the honeymoon. And a lot of couples do.
And the other thing we really are against is saving the kiss, the first kiss for at the altar. For one thing, a kiss is a very personal, passionate moment. And to do that in front of an audience for the first time.
When you haven't practiced 500 times before that.
And kissing is very much the barometer for how a sexual relationship will work. And if kissing isn't working for a premarital couple, they should find out what's going on and get some help, because that's going to reflect on how the sex life will be.
But the idea of having the first kiss at the altar is we've had so many destructive stories about that. And it's just an awful idea.
Yeah, if that's going to be the case, then for sure know that you probably won't consummate the marriage on the honeymoon. That you need to take time, then take our book, do the exercises, really get to know each other first before, if that's your value, that you don't want to have anything physical until the honeymoon or the marriage.
Well, that is so great to hear. I've never heard it put that straightforward before. And I think back, our first kiss was not at the altar. Actually, my husband kissed me before date number 2, but that's a whole other story. But at the altar, is that you as well?
But I have to say, I've been taught not to kiss anybody so I ended up in the hospital with an undiagnosed illness, and we still say, he's such a great kisser, it's no wonder.
No way, that's amazing.
It stirred up feelings in me I did not know anything about, and I was 17, and so it really, if that had been how we started our marriage, it would have been a real we wouldn't be sex therapists today.
I love it. Well, and you're right. Even that moment at the altar is so special. I hope I never forget that. My husband, Mark, actually leaned in and kissed me 3 times, and we still laugh about it. So that is really helpful. What would you say then as we progress through couples in marriage? What are some of your favorite recommendations to share with couples who want to be proactive and enhance their sexual intimacy, even if things are currently going pretty well?
Yes. Well, we just think if couples are intentional about their sex life, rather than just thinking again that it will just happen naturally.
Some couples come in and say, well, we don't want to plan it. We just want it to be spontaneous. And we ask them the Dr. Phil question. So how's that working out for you?
And it's so funny to us that one thing that's very curious is couples will come because they're not having sex. Like, this isn't the couple where things are good. We'll get back to that question. But they're not having it as often as one of them wants, or not often at all. And we'll say, when is the last time? They said, well, it's been a couple months, maybe a year. And then they resist planning for it. And we say, what's that about? It's obviously not working by not being intentional. So whether it's the resistance to being intentional.
So the first thing we would say is,
those for whom it's going well, we answer that kind of backwards.
but the first thing we would say is plan. When you're in that first year of marriage, and if everything's going well, it doesn't seem like you have to plan. But once kids come along, or you're working on your next business or degree, or
doing your doctoral dissertation
or whatever, life is going to get in the way. And so the only way it's going to work is if you are intentional about your sex life. That's one thing. A second thing is, we would encourage them to practice what we're going to have you put out for everyone, the formula for intimacy. And let's talk about that.
Yes, and this is something we came up with years ago. And then after the sex and the brain research came out, I think in about 2008, I can't remember when it came out, we found why we had developed this from our clinical observations. And then we found out why it works, and now we can explain in it. So we talk about what we need to do is plan 15 minutes a day to connect. This isn't to have sex. This is to keep the intimacy going so that we can have an ongoing good sex life. We talk about kissing as part of that, and that kissing...
But you jump way ahead.
Right.
First, we talk about an emotional connection where you're just looking at each other. And one of the things that came out in the research, too, is that in couples look in each other's eyes, it raises the oxytocin level, which is the bonding hormone.
And we actually came up with that because of breastfeeding and looking into a baby's eyes. And we knew that that was important in terms of attachment. And so we started to use that when, like I remember a couple where the man just had no capacity for intimacy. And he was raised in an orphanage and adopted after the first year of life. So he had no attachment during that first year of life. And it's hard to, how do you teach attachment? You know, you can't hold your couples or your couple in therapy and hold them and give them what they didn't get as from their mom or from a nurturing caregiver. And so we found that looking into their eyes really helped. Well, now we discover in this 15-minute thing where you start by sharing something positive and looking into each other's eyes, because the eye-to-eye contact triggers oxytocin, and that's the bonding, attachment, intimacy hormone. And so we start that way, and we found that certain couples, when they would talk to each other, you could tell they wouldn't look at each other. They'd go past each other rather than have that eye-to-eye contact. And other couples would just be so engaged. And we could make a difference to which couples responded well in the therapy process and where there was a lot of resistance or difficulty.
So the first thing is that emotional contact. The next thing is a spiritual connection. And
this is all in this 15 minutes. You can set the timer just to practice it. And with having 4 kids, you and your husband, you practice this.
But for a spiritual connection, everyone is in a different place on their spiritual journey, but that could be saying a prayer together, it could be reading a verse, it could be reading a couple's devotional, it could be
an inspirational reading, something where it connects our spirituality into the center of this attachment.
And then, so there's the emotional connection, there's a spiritual connection, and then you go to the physical connection.
And you give each other a full
body hug. Not what we would call a Southern Baptist hug. You know.
That real, and just clothes on, but your fronts just totally connect and hold.
And that's got to be 20 seconds because the research has shown that a 20-second hug also raises the oxytocin level.
Even more strongly. So you just get a huge surge of oxytocin after 20 seconds. So again, we encourage couples to set a timer on their phone and test which is 20 seconds.
And play with it.
Yeah. And have fun. And you can do this with the kids around. It's great for them to see that mommy and daddy hug each other. And then have a 5 to 30 second passionate kiss.
And we're talking about a kiss that is not a peck.
Get into it.
But a passionate kiss. And the reason we say 5 seconds is some couples can't last longer than that kissing.
And sometimes if there's been, like maybe a person was abused with the childhood kissing and kissed inappropriately, and so that kissing is aversive, and the hugging and the eye-to-eye will help. That's why the kiss is the last thing.
And you see what the kiss does is it raises the dopamine level. That's the exciting hormone rather than the bonding hormone.
That's the spark. And even after almost 61 years, we can still get a little spark with that dopamine kissing. So that's that's the formula, and we would suggest that every couple practice that.
So, and that's just the 15 minutes a day. Then we talk about 1 day per week where you have a time set aside for the two of you.
Where you just have, and you don't have to be, people say, but what if we aren't turned on? You don't have to be turned on, but taking time to pleasure each other, to enjoy each other's bodies. And often in that process, we do get turned on, but if you don't, it's just wonderful that you were together and touching and caressing and enjoying each other's bodies. And maybe one gets turned on and the other doesn't. It's the turn on, the response isn't the important part. The important part is the physical connection, caressing each other's bodies.
So 15 minutes a day, one connection during the week, could be evening normally, but sometimes it's daytime. And then we suggest that once a quarter, a couple devote themselves, at least for a day, just to each other. And then once a year, at least, do something like a whole weekend, whether it's a retreat or a getaway or something that is just focused on the relationship. And that's the formula for intimacy.
Yeah, and it can be attending a seminar or watching a podcast like this, something where you're together devoting time. And hopefully, obviously if a mom's breastfeeding, the baby has to go with you wherever you are. So there's a period of time where that won't work purely, but still, if the older children are with grandma and grandpa, or if you don't have a grandma and grandpa around, if you're in a small group or you have couples, neighbors who have young children, trade. One weekend a year you take their kids, and one weekend a year they take your kids. But you can always find some way to do it, and it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't even have to go somewhere. If somebody can take your kids, you can stay home and have the weekend and do some reading and studying. Read one.
That's the other thing that we would recommend for couples is that they read out loud together.
And there's a reason for that, again, with the brain. When we have emotions spinning around in our head that affect our body, they're in the right hemisphere of our brain. Our verbal center is in the left hemisphere of our brain. And when we verbalize, when we say something out loud, it has to cross the midline, and it loses its power on our body. It's like when a speaker shakes when they talk and they say, I'm sorry, but when I talk, I shake, and then usually they stop shaking. I remember I had a brother who did court presentations, and he had that, and he would just say it, and then it was done. But verbalizing, that's why we recommend so highly that couples, if they're using our materials, that they read them out loud together and use it. It's almost like the book can become a therapist. It's like the third party, and then you can read one sentence and talk an hour about it, or a paragraph, or you could read the whole chapter and there's nothing in it that triggers a conversation. But it isn't reading to get through the book. It's reading to stimulate the conversation and having the verbal interaction, so the stuff that's bothering you or that's affecting your body isn't controlling anymore. It's getting out.
Wow, you literally just answered a question that I had posed to the Lord this morning in my quiet time. I was journaling it and just thinking of stress that can come on when we've been too busy and haven't had that time to just get current and share things at the end of the day. If it's carried on a few days and you do one huge chunk of time, that still is better. But just noticing that it was little by little, and I felt like, Lord, is there something here that is a stress reliever when we share it with our words? And you just backed it up with the brain science. That's amazing.
Yes, yes.
Well, then, if we continue...
I just want to say one more thing quickly, okay? And that is, for couples that are generally in good shape with each other, we would recommend reading our book, The Married Guy's Guide to Great Sex, which is for men, and Enjoy, The Gift of Sexual Pleasure for women. And
they're easy reads. They're not real technical. There's some technical stuff just to help us understand, just like we've shared here. But they really read well. And you can take, read one paragraph in the Married Guy's Guide and then one in the other, or
or read one whole book through and then the other one there. I just wanted to say that as one more recommendation for couples to just keep the spark alive.
That's wonderful. We have both of those books in our home and have heard fabulous feedback from others who've read it. So we'll link that actually in today's show notes so people can have an easy link where they can find it. But if we're thinking about those healthy couples that are currently content, do you have any examples of stories or best advice that comes to mind for those who are mutually satisfied with their intimacy in marriage?
Well, the first thing we usually ask is about the kissing and whether they're still kissing passionately, or if they're
because what's happened for many couples is the kissing becomes the determiner of whether we're going to have sex tonight or not. So if husband comes home and wife comes home and he reaches out for a kiss and she determines, do I feel like having sex tonight? And if it's a yes, then it's on the lips. If it's a no, it's on the cheek. And
then she goes like this rather than like that. And I teach a lot of mothers groups, and that is such a common one. They just really identify with that. And so if they realize they make a deal that our kissing, we keep kissing passionately, and we do it whether the kids are there or not, and we do it whether or not we're going to have sex. It doesn't mean I want to have sex. That I lean in and kiss passionately.
It means I'm wanting to connect intimately with you right now. And if sex happens later, that's great. If it doesn't, that's okay too.
We probably don't have as many stories about those for whom it's going well, because
people don't come to us if it's going well.
But I do have some from the mothers groups, and mainly, and not a specific one, mainly that's the feedback I get. Oh, we kiss all the time, and in fact, the kids, say, you guys, yuck, don't kiss, but it's good for them to see you kissing, because eventually they'll be in your role. So.
That's right. I love that you bring up a really crucial point about even just considering all of our non-sexual touch outside the bedroom, that all of that contributes to a better sex life inside the bedroom. So is there anything you'd want to expound upon there?
Yeah, well, I just thought of another example that some couples take a walk together, particularly like if they do have kids and they're old enough that they're fine, to be in the house if they're just going for a walk around the block or whatever. And they walk and talk. And there's a lot of brain research that says walking and talking is very helpful. And mothers will say, I just love it if my husband and I can go for a walk and hold hands and chat and talk, maybe even stop and kiss a bit.
And now a brief message from our sponsor. Have you ever had this experience before where you were so tired of fighting with your home printer or standing in line at one of those office stores only to spend way too much time just to get your homeschool materials printed? There is a better way. The Homeschool Printing Company was started by a veteran homeschool family to make life easier by making printing more affordable. Their customers typically save around 50% compared to big name stores. It's so simple to use. You just upload your documents, choose how you want them printed, and then they ship it right to your door. They've served thousands of families since 2017, and they truly care about offering quality at a fair price. You don't even have to be limited by simply printing homeschool materials. I actually was able to get connected with Carol on their team, and she's been wonderful as she walked me through printing some PDFs that I've designed for the Savvy Sauce. Our team together has created multiple printables with questions, and sometimes you may be familiar with these that you get in your email inbox. But now, the Homeschool Printing Company walked me through the process how to print these and have them bound together as a packet to distribute. They were wonderful to work with, and I highly recommend you give them a try. So whether it's for your own side hustle or your homeschool, it's time to get those PDFs off your device and into your hands. The Homeschool Printing Company's got you covered, and first-time orders automatically get 10% off. So less stress starts here. Visit them today at thehomeschoolprintingcompany.com to get started. Thanks for your sponsorship. How do you see other forms of intimacy spilling over into sexual intimacy in marriage?
I would say a little bit more about what you mean there.
Sure. Just thinking of a couple, I'm assuming most couples don't say, we have a fantastic sex life, but we never connect emotionally. Or if they're Christ followers, if spiritual intimacy isn't a piece at all, that probably affects emotional and sexual intimacy.
Right. Yes. Having that time to connect in other ways. If sex is just, that's why the formula for intimacy is so important. If sex is just about the erotic, getting our bodies together and getting turned on and having that dopamine surge, that's what porn is. It's not about a relationship. And if we function that way in our marriage, long term, it won't be good for both. It won't be mutually satisfying.
Yeah, another way of saying that is, unless there is some level of intimacy and connection, the sex life over time will disintegrate.
And that's one of our benefits of working together, because we do everything together practically. I mean, every now and then he needs a break to get out of the house to go to the office. Just to have some independent, which I think guys maybe need more than women, but some women may need it too. Maybe high-powered working women outside the home. I don't know. But knowing if you need some space, that's fine too. But making sure you do have plenty of time to connect, and even, like you said, share your thoughts, just to get that verbal stuff going. And if you never have time together to have spiritual connection or emotional expressions, how are you going to de-stress? If the only de-stressing is that dopamine moment of the erotic release.
One of the things that we know is that first of all, men often find it easier to connect side by side than face to face. So that's why a walk is often good for a man as well. If you think about men activities, that men golf together. They're sitting in the golf cart side by side, or they're playing a sport, or they're walking or jogging or whatever. And so men often first connect side by side and then can shift into the face-to-face. That's a pretty common thing.
And then sometimes, I'd love for you to speak into this, some married couples have reported that the husband will say, it unlocks something emotionally in me when I connect sexually with my wife. And I'm trying to recall the science behind it, probably the oxytocin that just floods in and makes him feel safe and connected. And so that it's such a unique cycle that the Lord created. Yeah,
what I was thinking about as you said that, women often say, I need to feel emotionally connected before we can have sex. And men say, I really feel emotionally connected after we have sex.
Right. Yes.
So how do we get those two to work together is the dilemma.
Well, and that's we talk about in our Married Guy's Guide to Great Sex and are so convinced of the biblical teaching that the husband's role is to love his wife like Christ loved the church. And the way Christ loved the church, we read in Philippians, he gave up his rights. He had the right to be equal with God. And men will say, well, don't I have the right? Doesn't she have to do it for me? Because that's my right. Well, Christ gave up his right, even to the death on the cross, and gets with us where we are. He became human.
But Paul says in Ephesians 5, but keep in mind, men, that you're really doing yourself a favor when you give up your rights and get with her, because then she gets turned on. Paul didn't say she gets turned on. I'm saying that.
But this is how we have concluded why he says that.
Why he says, man, you're really doing yourself a favor when you love her this way. And the reason is because then she gets turned on, and there's nothing that makes a man feel better than a turned on woman.
So even if maybe he's doing it, demanding it, or whatever, by his needs and not giving up his rights, the best way, he's not going to enjoy it as much as when she's really into it. And she can't get into it unless she feels that connection. So when he gets with her where she is, and she gets turned on, and then she invites, then it's like the Song of Solomon, and they're both delighted in what happens.
Yeah, because we got to keep in mind that the Song of Solomon, all he does is tell her how gorgeous she is and how much he likes all these various body parts, and then she gets turned on and all that stuff. And she's the one saying, come on, let's get going. Let's pick up the pace here. And she's doing the inviting. Why is she doing it? Because she's been so affirmed and adored and cherished. And that's what makes it happen for the couple. And then he ends up happy too.
Yeah, so well said. And something that we haven't discussed much before, maybe at all on the Savvy Sauce, is a sexless marriage. So will you first define what constitutes a sexless marriage, and then share any trends that you've seen over the years?
The first thing I'd say is that the big research that was done at the University of Chicago in the late 1900s
I think it was 1994 it came out.
Defined sexless marriages as marriages that have sex 10 times or less per year, so less than once a month. That's how it's been defined in our world.
Yeah, and we would say low sex or no sex marriages. And there's not been no research to indicate a difference, like that it's getting more that way or less that way since 1994.
Well, what we know is that there are many couples who have a low sex, no sex marriage, not because there's a problem, but because of their lifestyle. And in fact, the sociologists call these people DINS, D-I-N-S, dual income, no sex couples. And because their life is so busy, they're both working, they've got to get the kids to soccer practice and get the lunches ready for tomorrow because got to leave at 7:30 in the morning. And
or earlier to get them off to school on a bus.
And then everybody is exhausted by the evening, and so there isn't any energy left. So that's one of the reasons for low sex, no sex marriage lifestyle. And in fact, a while back there was a article in Newsweek. The cover story was
no sex, we're married, something like that. And it was like, yeah, there's a lot of sex before marriage, but then once we're married and we have kids and, they're sitting in bed and on their phone, one on the phone and one on their computer.
and there's no connection. And so lifestyle is the biggest thing. Then a second category would be when there are specific barriers to the relationship. It could be that the man is into porn, and so he's masturbating to get release, and
he's hooked on the dopamine surge, not the oxytocin.
And there's no intimacy there because it's not an intimate relationship with the person on the screen. It's just getting him aroused and ejaculating.
And choosing exactly what he wants. And another difficulty we just want to mention is sometimes when men have been hooked on porn and they've gotten control of that and they're not using it anymore, but the woman still feels like an object because he's wanting her to do what he saw in porn. And that will not work. It will be very destructive because they need that connection for her to be responsive. So he may say, now I stopped my porn. Now you're still not, you won't do this and you won't do that. And so it's really important to know that once the porn gets under control, then the couple needs to work through a book like our Restoring the Pleasure or get help from a certified sexual therapist to learn how to be intimate and definitely start practicing the formula for intimacy. And that may be difficult for him, and he may even avoid it. But the more he can kind of force himself to do that And she cannot be the porn object. It's got to be about connection and getting with her where she is.
But that would be just one kind of problem. Another would be if there are some specific difficulties, like the man ejaculates prematurely, or the woman has difficulty being orgasmic.
There were hurts in the past, like a bad dating relationship where one was hurt, or child sexual abuse, or having been raised in an alcoholic or emotionally out of control home. And that's where we all need to have safety growing up, and our parents need to be in control so we can bounce against those walls. But when parents were out of control, we internalized the control far too young.
And so one thing we know about adult children of alcoholics is the first thing you read any book on it, the first thing they'll say, the ACA has a high need for control. Well, what's happening in a sexual relationship? It's getting out of control. And so there is a real resistance to let your body get out of control.
But once they get aroused, then they can really respond. But there's resistance even to let that happen.
And then often the interest drops right off again, and the next time it's just as difficult to let go.
But it isn't like because she had an intense orgasm, she liked that. She didn't like it. In fact, I remember early in our practice, I helped the woman. She came because she wasn't orgasmic. And I was doing everything just by the book, and she became orgasmic too fast. I learned after that to find out about the emotionally out of control home, and that was early in our practice.
Did you know you could receive a free email with monthly encouragement, practical tips, and plenty of questions to ask to take your conversation a level deeper, whether that's in parenting or on date nights? Make sure you access all of this at thesavvysauce.com by clicking the button that says Join Our Email List so that you can follow the prompts and begin receiving these emails at the beginning of each month. Enjoy! If it was a couple, let's say they dated and there was some harm done during the dating relationship, but then they're married and now find themselves in a sexless marriage, even if they were having premarital sex, that seems like a trickier one to overcome the barriers. So what would be some of the first steps? Because they're still with the person who offended them.
Yeah, there you'd have to work through the relationship issues and have some...
Yeah, we wouldn't think of that as sexual therapy so much as first relational therapy to deal with the hurt, the pain, the barriers that happen during those traumatic events.
And then build trust. And again, we're back to our formula for intimacy, to build the trust. But then they would need the sexual therapy and restarting. And what sexual therapy is, it's stopping everything you've been doing sexually. So no intercourse, nothing. And you start over and you learn how to give and receive touch and to be close and intimate before, and you slowly build toward having entry.
We talk about this in our book, Restoring the Pleasure, which takes
a self-help book.
Couples through step after step if they want and need to do a rebuilding, a total retraining of their sexual life. And that's the only way that we can see where a couple has these emotional barriers from stuff from the past, whether it's their own past with each other or what they came into the relationship with.
And one thing we know also from Sex and the Brain research and our own observation is that sexual response patterns are easily conditioned and self-perpetuating. In other words, especially if the first response was to an external stimulation like pornography, then your body gets hooked on needing that image in order to respond, or needing that external stimulus. It's very different than when the first response was to the natural God-given urges during childhood or young adolescence. When it was that way, it isn't hooking. It's just a natural process in the body, then that can lead to a fulfilling sexual relationship.
And that can be true for both men and women. Whatever their first experience was in terms of getting aroused and particularly having an orgasm or an ejaculation, that we call it an imprinting event at a critical stage of development. And so if that first time was not just the natural response, but to something external, then we'll just use an example. Have dealt with a situation where a young
quite a few
girl,
situations like that.
A woman first discovered her father's Playboy magazines in the closet.
Or she was babysitting and at another home and discovered, the kids are asleep and she's waiting for the parents to come home.
And she's looking at this and then is looking at these images in the magazine, whatever it was, and she gets aroused and stimulates herself and has her first orgasm. That can lock in then that for her to have an orgasm with her husband, she has to fantasize about naked women. Not that she's a lesbian, but that got locked in. I'm just using this as an example of what happens with that first response. Whereas if that response had just happened because she woke up and felt those tingling sensations and stimulated herself, it wouldn't have caused that same kind of reaction.
It would be another way of saying if she just responded to the natural itch.
Well, and for all of those situations, though, even if somebody was exposed to something like that from a young age, or if they're in that relationship where they had past hurt or trauma in their background, what would you say is the overarching hope? Because it sounds like you've worked with couples all around the world, and in any situation, hope and healing are possible, especially because of Jesus.
Yes. And that is, back to your first question, what is so rewarding about functioning as sexual therapists and even just being available to answer questions over the phone is sometimes just a little bit of knowledge, or this podcast could open up a whole new world for a person or a couple and restart their sexual relationship in a way that works rather than keeping the old patterns going.
What we would want to underscore is no one has to get stuck with a bad sexual relationship. Mm-hmm. There is always hope. There are always ways around it, whether it's because there's been physical pain for the woman, or there's pain in the relationship, or there's difficulty with functioning, either getting aroused or having orgasms. All of that, that can be, people can end up being happy. We deal regularly, for example, with unconsummated marriages. Couples have been married for months or years and haven't been able to consummate. And that too can change.
And that's one where you really know you've been successful. You either have done it or you haven't. And that is so rewarding, because anyone who is stuck with the protocol and done the whole process, everyone has consummated. And that isn't just sexual therapy. Sometimes pelvic floor physical therapy is necessary. We need to work with the medical team. We need to have a team approach, but it's possible.
So the underlying or the overlaying message here is it is always possible to work toward a healthy and fulfilling sex life if couples are willing to do the deliberate work that it's going to take step by step.
But back to this sexless or no sex marriage, both have to acknowledge the issue, pursue either self-help, like with restoring the pleasure, or seek a certified sexual therapist. And we're a resource for finding that. We keep track of document in the computer that has all the people all over in other countries in every state. Now, some states, in some countries, there aren't people, but there are always ways with virtual that you can find help.
One thing we're going to add is that and we hope this message has come through in what we're talking about today, but unless there's an attitude of mutuality That is, that it has to be as good for one as it is for the other. There will not be a fulfilling sex life. The idea that somehow it's for the man and the woman has to take care of him is a very destructive idea.
And that usually comes out of the Ephesians 5 passage. Submit yourselves one to another. And wives, submit your husbands to your husbands and honor him as you honor God or Christ. And then it goes on. There's one verse about the woman submitting to the man, and then a bunch of verses about
12 verses telling the man how he's supposed to love his wife and
submit to the wife. And yet our evangelical Christian society often has gotten hooked on that the woman is responsible to keep the man. Before marriage, she's responsible to make sure they don't have sex, and after marriage, she's responsible to make sure they do have sex. I mean, it doesn't work, and it's got to be mutual. And every passage starts with or incorporates, even like that one, submit yourselves one to another. It isn't just the man can ask for whatever he wants, and then she's just got to do it. That kind of demand will never work for him long term, or for them together, or for her.
And what I'm hearing, the main two words that come to mind are truth and wisdom. And you're giving us God's truth from the Bible and even helping interpret what that looks like, even with the brain science. But that truth really does set you free, that knowledge, and knowledge goes into the wisdom piece as well. You think of in Proverbs when it says, above all else, get wisdom, though it costs everything you have. Get knowledge, get understanding. And so I love that that's your first place to begin to give hope to any couple. And your resources are a great place to get that first step of knowledge and then hopefully to work with a person if that's the next step needed.
And one of the things that has been so exciting to us to study the research that has been done on sexual response and all that, and brain and sex research, how much it affirms the scripture. It really does. And God created us, so we are his creation. So it makes sense that when we find out the facts, that they are affirming of scripture rather than contradictory. They do work with what we experience and what we learn from scripture.
So good. Well, this conversation has all been such a gift, but if people do want to follow up or learn more from the two of you, could you again just give us the best place where we can link in the show notes?
Well, to passionatecommitment.com, our website, to our formula for intimacy, and then to any of our resources. And we've mentioned probably the most important ones, the Newlyweds, Getting Your Sex Life Off to a Great Start, the Married Guy's Guide, and Enjoy, the Gift of Sexual Pleasure for Women, for couples of all ages and stages, and then Restoring the Pleasure for step-by-step sexual retraining when the sexual pattern is not working well for whatever reason.
And all those are listed on our website, passionatecommitment.com.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And this is your third time back, so you know that we're called the Savvy Sauce because savvy is synonymous with practical knowledge or insight. And so as my final question for both of you today, what is your Savvy Sauce?
Be intentional.
Yeah.
And probably you can guess how to be intentional because we mentioned it so many times. Practice our formula for intimacy.
Yeah, we would see that. In fact, couples many times say, that's changed our life. Just those 15 minutes a day that aren't focused on sex. They're just focused on connecting, and then the sex naturally grows out of that. So that's it.
And we hope that couples can just really learn to enjoy each other and delight in each other, and it can be a wonderful blessing to their family and to the community in which they serve when they are being fulfilled at home in the privacy of their home.
Yes.
So thanks for having us.
Yes, very nice.
It's good to see you face to face. and enjoyed it very much.
Well, very much enjoyed this time together with both of you. Thank you for everything you shared. You are a delightful couple, and it's so great to connect through this screen and just see your love flow between the two of you. You're wonderful role models, and I just want to say thank you for being my guests.
Oh, good. Love it. Okay.
Enjoy.
Hope to see you again.
Absolutely. Take care. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye. One more thing before you go. Have you heard the term gospel before? It simply means good news, and I want to share the best news with you. But it starts with the bad news. Every single one of us were born sinners, but Christ desires to rescue us from our sin, which is something we cannot do for ourselves. This means there's absolutely no chance we can make it to heaven on our own. So for you and for me, it means we deserve death and we can never pay back the sacrifice we owe to be saved. We need a Savior. But God loved us so much, He made a way for His only Son to willingly die in our place as the perfect substitute. This gives us hope of life forever in right relationship with Him. That is good news. Jesus lived the perfect life we could never live and died in our place for our sin. This was God's plan to make a way to reconcile with us so that God can look at us and see Jesus. We can be covered and justified through the work Jesus finished if we choose to receive what He has done for us. Romans 10:9 says that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you will be saved. So would you pray with me now? Heavenly Father, thank you for sending Jesus to take our place. I pray someone today, right now, is touched and chooses to turn their life over to you. Will you clearly guide them and help them take their next step in faith to declare you as Lord of their life? We trust you to work and change lives now for eternity. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If you prayed that prayer, you are declaring Him for me, so me for Him. You get the opportunity to live your life for Him. And at this podcast, we're called The Savvy Sauce for a reason. We want to give you practical tools to implement the knowledge you have learned. So you ready to get started? First, tell someone. Say it out loud. Get a Bible. The first day I made this decision, my parents took me to Barnes & Noble and let me choose my own Bible. I selected the Quest NIV Bible and I love it. You can start by reading the book of John. Also, get connected locally, which just means tell someone who's a part of a church in your community that you made a decision to follow Christ. I'm assuming they will be thrilled to talk with you about further steps, such as going to church and getting connected to other believers to encourage you. We want to celebrate with you too, so feel free to leave a comment for us here if you did make a decision to follow Christ. We also have show notes included where you can read scripture that describes this process. And finally, be encouraged. Luke 15:10 says, "In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." The heavens are praising with you for your decision today. And if you've already received this good news, I pray you have someone to share it with. You are loved, and I look forward to meeting you here next time.